Krista Vernaleken at Veterinary Hospital.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Renzullo.
Talking today about allergies in pets.
Spaying and neutering your pet.
Pet weight management. And we're going to talk today about pet summer fun and safety. But doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, I got
You're good, good girl. You got a lot of treats, a lot of
TD
TD treats.
Up on that table. And welcome back to the second episode of the podcast. I'm Dr. Krista Vernaleken.
And I'm Dr. Lindsay Renzullo.
So we wanted to talk today about ticks, and the main reason for this was that I keep getting this question or statement from owners in visits, and right now we're in beginning of October, end of September, and I keep getting them saying, I'm done with my tick control now.
All the time,
What do you tell people?
You know, and it's so tempting because the weather's starting to get cooler. Right. You think that maybe you can get away with not necessarily doing all of the little things in the packet, trying to sort of make it extend out a little bit longer. But honestly, I tell people this time of year, or any time of year, you should be really doing flea and tick control. And this time of year can be so tempting to stop because you think it's going to be colder and they're not going to be out there, but that's really not the case. Even in some very cold weather, even with snow on the ground, you can still get ticks that can come out. And they do this little thing called quests where they're looking for a host. And there's a classic picture of a little tick, sitting out over a blade of grass with snow all around him and just sitting there waiting for a host to hop on. So it's really important to keep going with the tick control even though the winter months are coming.
So I looked this up too because I will admit, I learned all of this in vet school, and then, you forget stuff as you go. So ticks have this very complicated life cycle, and it's actually a 2-year life cycle. So they start as babies, right, as we all do. They hatch in the summer months, May-ish, and they become active, and they're called nymphs. Yep. So that's the first stage of ticks. Those little babies are active right now. Like, this is their best time. They actually can't transmit diseases because they are so brand new and they can't have fed on anybody.
Right.
But they eat 5 days, 7 days on an animal, and that could be any mammal.
Yep.
They drop off, and then they wait, and they lie dormant throughout the winter, and they molt. So they molt to the next stage, which is,
yes.
right?
Yes.
What is it?
The adults?
No, the larva.
The larva stage. So from the nymphs to larva, then the adults.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Sorry, no.
So larva, we say, those guys are small, and they're actually the size of a poppy seed.
Yep.
So look at a poppy seed bagel, and that's how big they are. Those guys can transmit diseases. They're active in the spring, and then they have now, again, fed for another 5 to 7 days on another mammal. They drop off, they molt, and now in the fall, again, October through December, really, the adults who also can transmit diseases are active.
Yeah, so with those 3 phases, it is really important to remember that they're all really small. People think that they're going to see these big ticks, but especially those larval phases, they're so tiny. And, Krista mentioned the size of a poppy seed. It's really hard to pick that up, on any dog, especially one that's, got a lot of hair, a lot of fur, or darker in color. It's really hard to see those things.
Right.
And a lot of times the dogs that we're testing that come up positive, people have never even seen a tick on them. So it's really important to make sure you're doing those preventatives.
Another thing that I hear all the time, it's a little bit of maybe like a pet peeve of mine, is like people saying, oh, it wasn't a deer tick. So the tick species we have in the area are dog ticks.
Yep.
What was that one?
The American brown tick.
American brown tick.
Yep.
Deer ticks.
Which is the black-legged or the Exodes tick.
So they're changing the names on us.
They do. They try to make it harder.
And we have a recent incursion into maybe the area which is the Lone Star tick, which I think it hasn't necessarily fully reached Massachusetts yet, but it's kind of in Connecticut and the coast there. Yeah. So every single one of them can transmit diseases. So just because you didn't find a deer tick doesn't mean your dog can't have a serious disease.
And even with those ticks, when you remove them, it really is very hard to properly identify them. They're very small. Some of the differences on these ticks, you're talking about just the minute differences of how their mouth is sort of angulated, if it's a point versus more of an open shape, the way that the coloring on their legs, things like that, and they're very, very small. So it's really hard to appropriately or accurately assess, especially if you're not doing this on a regular basis, what each tick is.
And like a larva,
It's really hard.
that's a tiny little. How can you tell the difference between a larval stage of all of these different? So there are experts though that can. So actually, there's a great website that I would direct anyone to that is run by the University of Rhode Island. It's a nonprofit website, and they actually will identify your tick for you for free. So you'll snap a picture of it, and you'll tell them where you found the tick, and they will actually tell you what it was. That's tickencounter.org, which is just, it's a wealth of information.
Yeah, the website itself is actually quite cool. I hadn't gone to it until, Krista had mentioned it to me, and it has not only, just different different pieces of information about ticks, but it has a lot of really valuable resources, things to do if you encounter a tick, things to do to help prevent you from, encountering ticks. So it is a really great website.
And it is geared, truthfully, it's probably geared more towards humans.
People, yeah.
Right. But part of preventing Lyme disease and other diseases in people is preventing it in our pets as well. So
they actually had a very cool part on that. I think it was on that website where you could send your clothes in, and they could actually, is that same website?
So that's that same website.
You would send your clothes in, and they would actually spray your clothes with a type of a pesticide that would make your clothes tick-free clothes. So if you're going to go camping or you're sending your kids off to a summer camp, you can have tick-free clothes, your own clothes.
So that's prevention, both in people and in animals. Obviously the animals, like we've talked about that before, and you can kind of look up our previous shorter shows about tick prevention. There's all kinds of meds, topicals, collars, and orals for dogs and cats. Preventing it on people, the clothes thing I think is great.
Yeah.
So I truthfully don't know what that costs, but you can send your kids jeans or shoes, I think, off and have them tick proofed. Your yard can be sprayed as well, and there's also information on Tick Encounter on that. I promise I don't work for that website, nor do I get any income from
it. No throwbacks.
But the key thing is getting the spray. I guess they have to really make sure that they spray hard underneath the leaves that are all packed down, because that's where the ticks are. Ticks are tending to be in the sort of wooded areas where there's brush, but also like in the leaf beds.
And grass and things like that, tall grasses are a really common spot for ticks for people to find ticks. And it actually, as you're talking about that, made me think, and a lot of people think that, ticks will actually fall from the sky, because a lot of times they find them on their heads or on the top of their dogs, and that's actually not true. Ticks typically don't climb up a tree and hang out and are jumping down on top of you. They are normally on the ground or in tall grasses is where you're going to find ticks mostly. And
they get on your head by climbing up you, which is so gross.
Yeah, but they want to find a nice spot to sort of hide. So, but the Tick Encounter site is fantastic, and we have all these wonderful preventions for our pets, and there's really nothing that you can apply on you, that's really great, other than this wonderful, cool thing that you can do with your clothes.
We don't advise that you take your pets flea and tick meds.
No.
That sort of thing.
We do not.
Not labeled in humans.
No.
And then the other interesting thing is, do you know the different kinds of animals in the wild that eat ticks?
Yeah, so there's lots of different animals in the wild that do eat ticks. And making sure that we're taking care of those guys as well, and not necessarily doing things to exterminate these little fellows is important. Are a big one. Yeah. And birds and stuff are a big help out. They help out as well with tick control.
So you could get a backyard flock of chickens.
Always works out well, and you get eggs at the same time.
You can encourage turkeys, wild turkeys in your area.
Yeah.
And possums are ugly creatures.
They're kind of cute. They're homely.
I don't know.
They're homely.
Yeah. I find them kind of ugly, really, honestly. But they do eat ticks, and they whether you want to encourage possums in your yard or not, they're very helpful for that.
You know, and it's great that we have this in the background here, because this does really give you some sort of indication, even though there's not anything to scale, you can sort of appreciate how all three of these ticks can look very, very similar, you know, especially to somebody that has an untrained eye. And so, you know, you're taking this off your dog, and normally when you take it off, you're not taking it off to preserve every single leg, and you're kind of pinching it and squeezing it and pulling it off. And so you might sort of do some damage. So figuring out which tick is actually on your dog is a little bit harder than you would imagine. And that's actually a good point of, you know, telling people how to really appropriately pull these ticks off if they do find them on themselves or on their dog. The CDC's website is what we sort of recommend.
Has good information too.
Yep.
Yeah.
You really should just sort of grab it at the base with a forceps.
Tweezers, yeah.
Tweezers, forceps, and gently pull. Back in the day, my dad used to, you know, tell me to take a match and light it, and stick it on that tick, and it is a very bad idea. Or dump some alcohol, like, you know, rubbing alcohol on it. Again, a very bad idea.
Just pull it out.
Just pull it out, nice and slow.
Yeah. And then you know you can actually. So this is a reasonably, I think, new thing that if you do find a tick on you, and you're particularly worried about it, or on your pet, you can actually send it off to be tested for diseases within it to even know if it's a risk. Now that does cost money. There's variable pricing, I think, for depending upon what you want tested, $45 to like $200. But again, on their site, you send it to UMass Amherst, I believe, or one of the UMasses. They tell you how to send it, they give you packing labels, and they test your tick. Humans will, about 60% of the time, will get a red ring around an area if Lyme is the issue.
Yeah.
But again, remember there are other tick-borne diseases, and animals don't get that. So
yeah, and we can see that red ring. We see it even sometimes with some of those like little black fly bites and stuff on your pets. That little classic, you know, it's considered almost classic for Lyme in people. Just we don't see that on dogs. So just because you don't see it, you're missing it, doesn't mean your dog necessarily does not have Lyme.
So that's ticks in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
No, I mean, the only other thing, I think we've probably talked about it in one of our previous episodes, but that, you know, cats really can't contract Lyme disease, which is funny. So people a lot of times will ask me, well, if cats can't get Lyme disease, what's the point of, you know, any tick prevention in cats? And there are a lot of other diseases, you know, that cats can get through ticks, and a lot of these tick controls also have flea control added into it. So I tell people for your outdoor cats, it's obviously a very good idea to do that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I also don't want live ticks dropping off in my house off of the cat. So there's that too.
Yeah, that's very good.
So shifting gears a little bit to hurricanes and disasters. So, you know, right now, if you're watching this in the future, we just had 3 major hurricanes hit in various parts of the United States. And a lot of the time, we don't always think about pets, or sometimes we do know that there's some issues with the animals as well.
Yeah.
So what did you hear? Did you hear anything in this particular
Yeah, I mean, this, you know, as far as the hurricanes, the big hurricanes that hit, we had Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey, and Hurricane Maria. And Hurricane Harvey, I think, was the big one in the sense that it hit the U.S. the hardest, and, you know, in Texas.
Don't say that to people in Puerto Rico,
it hit the U.S. the hardest, so we heard more about it.
Puerto Rico's in the U.S.
Oh, yes, a territory. But yes, in Texas, we saw a lot of cases where, you know, you had animals that were left behind and tied up to trees and stuff. And that actually, you know, there was a lot of movement of how we sort of handle these pets and how we handle our companions in hurricanes after Katrina. And they've actually, you know, instituted a lot of laws, like new laws. I don't know if one has an official law name or anything.
Yeah, so so in Hurricane Katrina was a big disaster, specifically for everyone, but the animals, because they really didn't have a lot set up to rescue the animals with their humans. So especially in these low income areas or different socioeconomic areas, the people might be using sort of mass transport to evacuate. And a lot of people their pets were turned away. So they would be trying to bring their pets, but they don't physically have a car that they could drive away, and they would be trying to get on a bus or go to a shelter, and their pets would be actually, in some cases, forcibly taken away from them. So in 2006, after that, there was an act of Congress called, I'd have to remember, the Animal Displacement and Rehabilitation Act.
It's an official name for sure.
That said that if an area wanted to have FEMA funding, which we all do, they had to actually have a plan in place for the pets. So still though, there's stray animals that need something done to care for them during these disasters.
Some of these big farming animals.
And still, you also have a person that does evacuate with their animal and fully plans, I'm keeping my pet, but then they realize that they have no home to return to and they don't have housing and they can't. And then, I guess there's lots of reasons why animals may be displaced from the area during these hurricanes.
Right, and so the shelters down there definitely were hit hard. They were inundated. Shelters that would normally house something like 20 animals were having like well over 100 animals. It was just, they were setting up cages in the middle of the floor and in places where they would normally have hallways and walking, places where they would be walking. So a lot of those shelters relocated those animals up here. And we've actually, have you seen any hurricane animals?
I haven't yet, no. Have you?
I've actually had 2 hurricane animals already rehomed up here. And the shelters down there, you can tell, are pretty inundated. The medical records and the stuff that we're receiving from the South at this point is somewhat limited. And so it's sort of our responsibility and the owner's responsibility to realize that because of the mass displacement of these animals, that we need to be very cognizant of certain diseases that might be present down south that we don't necessarily have up here, and things that we need to maybe watch for, treat, that we would do a little bit differently up in the Northeast.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I think all pet owners need to recognize, that there's a lot of movement of animals throughout the country, and especially when something like this happens. So, what's prevalent down in Texas?
Right.
You've got a lot of heartworms.
Yep.
Almost like, I think I read 80% of the stray animals
lot of dogs
have
have
heartworms. You have influenza, which is not a problem in Massachusetts right this moment, but that's a very, very infectious disease.
Yep.
You can have leptospirosis outbreaks, parvovirus.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that pet owners in some parts of the country are fairly sheltered from, and then we have this influx of animals into the area that are diseased. Not their fault, but nevertheless.
And it does impact. It impacts the other animals in this area too as well. You bring a lot of animals that have heartworm up in this area, for instance. Heartworm is transmitted by mosquitoes. It requires a mosquito to bite a dog that has heartworm and then bite another dog. And so if you have a lot more animals in the area that are positive for heartworm, you do get worried that you could potentially be transmitting heartworm to dogs that were previously healthy. Thus the importance of continuing your preventatives year round.
So, we make those recommendations for things like heartworms. I hear frequently, heartworms aren't that common in Massachusetts. And that is true, but that doesn't account for all this movement of animals.
Right.
So, adopting hurricane rescues is another interesting thing. So a lot of people do adopt these animals, and that's great. I think that's wonderful that they receive a home. I think when you adopt an animal, you do need to recognize that they might be coming with a host of problems. And I think this is kind of like a cautionary thing with rescues in general, is that various different rescue organizations kind of handle their rescues differently. And like we were talking a few minutes ago about this, frequently, you get like a truckload of dogs and they say, meet us in the parking lot. That doesn't happen in Massachusetts because there is a mandatory 2-day sort of quarantine, but they will say to a Massachusetts resident, drive to New Hampshire or Connecticut or Rhode Island to get your pet. And that's not wrong, right?
It just leaves the owner and the pet sort of at a different place because they don't have that 2-day quarantine. You can get a dog that at first might seem okay, but then within the next 24, 48 hours, it's very apparent that they've contracted a respiratory illness and they've become very, very sick. And then it's really hard because as an owner, you're basically taking on this dog that you a lot of times bond with almost instantaneously, and then in 48 hours they're requiring some significant medical attention. So it can be a little bit difficult. And again, it's great that these shelter organizations are transporting these pets and helping these pets because we need all the help that we can get in situations like this. But just as a pet owner, from a veterinarian telling to pet owner, I'd just be cautious of it and figure out if they do have any contingency plans. If those pets get sick, do they have any means to sort of help you guys out as well?
And just be ready for it.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if that happens. Like you throw 30 dogs in a truck and then transport them 20 hours, they're going to be stressed. One of them has something. It's just like an airplane,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, they're going to be stressed. Like you said, their immune system's already a little bit,
Right.
they're stressed, their immune system's can be compromised, and then they're in close quarters with not the best ventilation. You worry about them getting sick. So,
and then, I mean, to help out in ways other than truly adopting a pet, you can certainly consider donating to human organizations, but also to the ASPCA.
Yep.
The ASPCA actually has a pretty complete hurricane relief and donation site, so you could check them out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
to be prepared.
Oh yes, to be prepared for hurricanes.
I mean, my main thing there is just bring your pet.
Yeah.
Like if you can, and I know that you can't always, but don't tie your pet to a tree. It's really not great to leave your pets at your house. What if you're not back for 2 weeks? Like you think you're only evacuating for 24 hours. Bring your pets with you.
Yeah, and don't put them in crates.
Right. Don't crate them. Don't leave them in a situation where they can't fend for themselves.
Right.
Tied to a tree. I mean, at least leave them out.
Yeah.
Right. That's not the way that I would want my pet to be handled.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I had about preparedness. Did you have any other?
No, I mean it is. It's very, very tragic, and we, given the location that we are, we're not one of the ones to typically get hit by hurricanes as commonly as South or Puerto Rico or U.S. territory or other places. But we do need to be cognizant that natural disasters can happen, and making sure that we're taking care of our animals is very important. Yeah.
So, on that note, we're going to move to a happier topic.
I like happier topics.
A product that I love. So occasionally, I guess, when we come across things that we just adore, I want to talk about them here.
I love it.
So this is a product called a Sure Feed pet feeder. I came across this in searching for a solution for my own house, and I think that it's a great solution for a lot of people. So this is a microchip pet feeder, and what that means is that it's going to recognize the microchip that your pet hopefully has. So a lot of pets are microchipped at the time of spay or neuter, and that's an identifier. So it will scan that and open only for that pet. So you also will get a tag. So if your pet wasn't microchipped but they wear a collar, then that will work too. But they just sneak their little head in to eat, and it opens up. And so
it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
The solution, this solves some problems. It doesn't solve every problem. But for the cat, my reason was I have one cat that will eat every bit of food put in front of him no matter what. You met him last time, Sebastian. And I have another cat that wants to kind of trickle feed throughout the day. As much as I want her to just eat a meal, she doesn't want to do it that way. But if I left the food out, it would be eaten by Sebastian nearly instantly. So she has a microchip, and she comes along and eats whenever she wants. It stays open for 3 seconds. She pulls her head away, it closes. And even, you can search for it, it's not in the manual, but there's something called intruder mode, where if another cat
is coming in,
it recognizes that there's a second animal's head in there, and it closes.
It's fantastic.
So,
when Dr. Vernaleken initially showed this to me, I honestly had no idea really what it was. Initially, the food wasn't in it, so it didn't really give it away. So I was, to my credit,
what's this device?
What is this? It almost looks like just a space age something or another. But I think it's perfect. I would be very interested to see in multi-cat households, how it works. Do you know, Krista, if it actually comes in different sizes too, like big dog ones? Or?
That's a negative about it, is that I've only seen it in this small size. Yeah. So mainly this is for small dogs and cats. I think most dogs do tend to eat all their food at once.
It's true. It is true.
But it does. You can get little removable, these little things, you can get them in different colors. So if you had, 3 different units and 3 different cats and you want to color code them.
And have you found that your cats get nervous or anxious with the sound of the
Not at
cover
all.
going up?
So it's so, I don't know if you...
It's very subtle.
Shh. Right. So no, I think that's one of the big pros about it, is that it doesn't scare anybody.
Yeah.
My skittish cat didn't really take her very long.
It's fantastic.
It programs very easily. There's just a button on the back that has a little cat on it that when you're ready, like you have a cat with a microchip and you want them, you just push the button and it's kind of learns that microchip. You don't have to enter any numbers or anything like that.
Oh, very nice.
I think it can do 23 animals, not that
we should have 23 cats in our house.
Eating from one bowl?
No.
Probably not. So negatives, I would say, I mean, it is expensive. It's $130, $250, depending on where you get it. I've seen it on Amazon. On the Home Again sells it in their shop because that's a microchip company. So it's expensive. It's a good investment for the lifetime of a cat, for sure, and you can use it on future cats. But the other negative is it is battery only. It's like 4 C batteries.
Okay.
So far, they've lasted quite a while. I've had this for 2 months, and I haven't had to replace the batteries.
Nice.
It says somewhere in some of the product reviews I saw that people were getting 8 to 9 months, so it's not too bad. And then the other negative that I came up with is these are plastic, and there are some animals that do have little reactions to plastic, and so for those animals, they don't have like a metal bowl. Maybe they will someday.
And you can't replace it, huh? Because it's
well,
very sensitive.
You probably could,
find a bowl.
You probably could just stick another bowl in here if you wanted to, because it's just a little, it's just a well.
Okay.
They're very washable and everything, but if you wanted the nice, pretty ones fit in there. Yeah. So.
It's very cool. I like that a lot.
It's a little cat feeder.
Yeah. I actually, since she showed this to me, I actually told 2 clients about it that are multi-cat households, and we have one big guy and one little guy in the house, and so hopefully that will help.
Oh, and they can't break into it either, because it's
solid.
It's amazingly solid. My dog has not been able to break into that cat. The other cat would destroy my other feeders.
I like how you don't have to get a new microchip for your cat. I like how it can already pick up the one that the cat has been microchipped with before.
Right.
It's
fantastic.
fantastic.
It's just going to pick up whatever microchip. You don't have to get a special microchip or anything. That's, I guess, one of the negatives is if your cat was not already microchipped, you would have to get a microchip. It's a good thing to do for a lot of reasons, and we can go into that in the future, but
it's very cool.
That's our show today.
This was a very good show. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you all next time at the PawedCast.
Have a great day.